but he's with us. He obviously can play. He has he has the tools, the size, the speed, the athleticism, and Michigan knows because Biff knows. Biff coached him. So.
All right, hey, welcome in, everybody. Mason Blue Reviews, Michigan Football Today. I'm Dennis Fithian as we get ready to go on this Tuesday, the 23rd. Thanks for joining us. Excited to be here. Lots to talk about. Welcome in if you're new on Twitter Spaces or wherever you're at watching this show. If you want to be involved, send us a message. Raise your hand. We'll put you on. We'll put your message up on the screen. I was indicating that today was going to be a Michigan football preview. It feels like all of the days are kind of Michigan football previews, but let me tell you, with 11 days to go, let me give you a Michigan football preview. And for that, in a quick idea on where I feel like Michigan figures into the landscape of the 2022 college football season, I think Michigan's right in the mix of things. And last year was a great step for them, obviously, the things that they were able to do. And if you're not paying attention, there could be people that would say, well, you're just all basing it on 1 year. And, look at the previous 6 years for Jim Harbaugh. All right, fair enough. But what do you look at when you look at a football team and how you think they're going to do? You look at the team, you look at the talent. I mean, you look at the coach, and you look at the talent that they have. In Michigan, offensively, I don't care who we are talking to. You could be talking to the biggest Ohio State, Alabama, Michigan State, a Notre Dame fan. They could be sitting right in here. Michigan's offense stacks up with any of those teams. Whatever team wins the national championship this year, whatever team makes the college football playoff, Michigan, as we sit here, their offense is not taking a back seat to anybody's in the country. Special teams, they were ranked number 1 last year in all of college football. You look at some of those advanced metrics and everything else, everybody's back there. And they're adding players like Darius Clemens, who figures to be in the return game. Ronnie Bell's coming back. I don't know if he's going to be returning punts or if there's going to be somebody else in there, but they, under Jay Harbaugh, have been fantastic on special teams. They should be the best special teams group in the country. And a lot of that, you start with your kickers, and both of them are back. Jake Moody's an All-American, and Brad Robbins can kick the ball to the moon. So, they, the 2/3, if we're just talking about, if we're talking turkey, Michigan with 2/3 of it right there, they don't take a back seat to anybody in the country. So it does come down to the defense and what they're going to be able to get out of the defense. We all know that. And you could say that the part about replacing Hutchinson and Ajabo has been beaten to death. It's been beaten to death because those guys were so good last year. And Michigan doesn't have somebody automatically say, wow, that guy could be the number 1 pick in the NFL draft, or that guy's a first-round pick sitting there at defensive end and outside linebacker. And that's been one of the themes. If you've been paying attention to Michigan this year, where in the summer, where Jim Harbaugh has talked about it's a no-star defense. But coming up in this show, we are going to get to the hype train and talk about some of these players that they have defensively. Let's get you that menu. We'll put it up there so you can see it for those of you that are watching. Michigan does have, this is breaking news. That's our breaking news sounder. Michigan does have a new collective. We will tell you about that. I am going to add 2 players to the hype team. Now, the hype train, it says hype team. The hype train or team, it is becoming a team, because as far as hype goes, I've got to add 2 players, and there's a lot of players that are already on that train. That is good news. Now, before I get to that collective and adding players to the hype team, and I'm giving you that Michigan football giving you that Michigan football preview. I will get to some of your messages. I also wanted to ask you about, and this gets to name, image, and likeness. If and we got a lot of Michigan fans that are watching and listening to this, and I wanted to ask you if you feel like because of name, image, and likeness now, players getting paid in and above their scholarship money that they're getting. Some of these guys are getting thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars. So they're not professionals. They're not in the National Football League, but they're getting paid. And there had always been this idea or this line about why you wouldn't boo a college player because they're not professional athletes. They're not getting paid. Well, they are getting paid now. So I'm going to ask you, and a lot of you, if not all of you, are Michigan fans. Could you see yourself booing Michigan at home? And this is and this is where we start. There's a part of a fan base we could sit in here and somebody could say, "What are you talking about? Why would you ever boo the home team? You're there because you love your team. You want to see them succeed. You don't want to do anything counterproductive like boo them. That would be the last thing." There are a lot of people that are like that. And then you include like college, and this is a shift because most people would agree over the years. Almost everybody would agree that, hey, you don't boo college kids. Pros, look, you understand they're professionals, they're getting money. But college kids, you don't boo them. That's that's off the table. It's not something that you would do. And I look at it like this. I can remember over the last 10 or 15 years when I was working in Detroit, there were a few times that watching, and I would be on the radio on Saturdays. And there would be a few times that both Michigan and Michigan State would be on, and I'd be on afterwards. But I'm recalling at least two Michigan State games over the years. I think one was against Cal, and one was against Oregon. I'm not 100% sure, but I think they were both. I think those were the two teams over the last 10 years. And Michigan State played. They were at home, and they played horrible. Like they might have been shut out in the first half. They couldn't move the ball across the street. I mean, it was ridiculous. And they got booed off the field. No question. I mean, it wasn't like there were a couple of people in my section. It was the entire stadium raining down boos on the Spartans at home as they went into the locker room. And afterwards, I said, hey, what about not booing the home team? You Spartan fans are serving it up at Spartan Stadium. And the phone lines, I could have taken 100 calls in a row that particular Saturday. All of them said the same thing. Great show. And then they said, we weren't booing the players. We were booing the coach. We were booing the offensive coordinator. We were booing the head coach. And it gets you off the hook. It does. And if we're really going to talk about it, if you're booing the head coach, the players are there, they hear that, you are booing the players. I mean, it's not like the head coach hears the noise. Of course, the entire team hears it. Everybody hears it. And so you really are booing the players, even though you said you were booing the coach. But, that's what they said. I go to as recently as last year, and I know name, image, and likeness technically started last year, so there were some guys that were getting paid. But I will go to Michigan's second game of the year a season ago. It was against Washington. They got up 10-0 on the Huskies at the half. And I remember getting online and seeing everybody like, this team should be up 30-0. They're letting Washington back in. They're never going to throw the ball. This team's a joke. You can't just run the ball. They're going to lose this game. They're playing it too conservatively. I saw all that. I was thinking of similar type thoughts during the halftime last year where Michigan was up 10-0. I thought that they needed to come out and throw the ball and get up by more than 10 measly points when they're dominating the game, or they are going to let Washington back into the game, and they could be in jeopardy of losing to a team that they look like they're way better than. What happened is that Michigan came out and ran the ball. but they had success running it. They smashed their way right down the field, running every single time, punching the Huskies right in the face. They went in, they were up by 3 scores, and you really couldn't complain. I mean, even the biggest complainers in the world were like, okay, 17-0. Maybe now they'll throw the ball. Well, they didn't, They just kept pounding it, ground and pound, and they blew the Huskies out. What was it, 31-0, 31-10. It ended up being, and Michigan beat that Huskies team. Well, the point here is that if Michigan would have come out in the second half and gone 3-and-out and ran the ball right up the middle to Hassan Haskins, right up the middle, no gain, right up the middle, 1 yard, 3rd and 9, handoff for 4 yards. Would there have been some murmuring in the crowd, like, "Oh my God, this is exactly what we were talking"? Yes, that's what a lot. If they weren't saying it or murmuring it, if there weren't murmurs of that, people were all thinking of that. So just think about if Washington did score, and then Michigan the next series was doing the same thing: handoff, 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 and there was 3-and-out at that point. As recently as last year, I think, and with Harbaugh and everything, I think Michigan fans would have started. I don't know if they would have been a whole 100,000. Boo! They would have started letting the Harbaugh hear it. If they weren't booing, they'd have said, "Hey, start throwing the ball. Stop handing it off right up the middle. Get into the 21st century. This is not 3 yards in a cloud of dust. You're going to lose this game," which, I don't know, cat calls are very similar to booing if you're not just flat out, "Boo! Get a clue, Gaddis." Those would have been the things that have been. So just as recently as last year. And I look at it like this, and like Michigan didn't get booed last year. And they may have been booed at home during the Rich Rod era, probably deserved a few times. I don't actually recall Michigan getting booed, but so I don't know how often it's happened at Michigan Stadium, if ever, if Michigan getting booed. And if there comes a time where Michigan really puts out a real clunker, will they deserve to get booed off the field? I don't know, to hear it a little bit from your fans. On one side, you're asking people, and sure, there's alum, there's parents, and that those particular two groups, they don't tend to be over the top, like obnoxious, rabid, even though they really like Michigan, hell, it's the backbone of the fan base, the parents and the alumni. But then there's the other, I don't even know what it is, 60%, 70%, whatever the number is, of just Michigan fans. And you're asking them to go in there and spend $1 million on parking and buy the ticket, go in, and there's no rules. Like, you could, as long as you're not falling down, getting in, you could be as drunk as, you possibly can get. You can go to the stadium and you can scream and yell and do anything you want, as long as you're, not getting personal and racial or, that kind of, you should be okay to be able to get in there and cheer on the team. If you don't like what's going on, you're going to have some people that are going to let you hear it. And to me, like when I say, is it a good idea to boo the team? Almost always, and I'm thinking about Michigan here. No, it's not a good idea. Meanwhile, people are emotional, and they're, now there's gambling, there's fantasy, there's the mixture. You could smoke, you could drama, you could do anything pretty much now and get into the stadium. So, and you're asking people to, go crazy within reason. So you're going to get that. And I look at what, now I say kids, I don't know, in the last at least decade, the players have all grown up with social media. And before that, you would have maybe, closet people talking about, there'd be sports talk radio and there were message boards, but you kind of have to search those things out. Now, social media, everybody all day long is like glued to their screen. They're trying to get likes. They're trying to get follows. They're trying all of that to build their brand online. And I got news for you. know why I say it. I've always tried to, when I hear people say, I got news for you. I got news for you. These players, since the time they were in high school, they were the best players in high school. They have been getting ripped to shreds, talk trash to, booed, smeared, everything from the time these guys were 16 years old, for the time that they've logged on to their phone and they're like, hey, I'm down to Michigan, Stanford, Miami, Texas, all, great places to go to college, whatever. And you don't go there and you got people like, you're a loser at 17 years old for a pick. So the point is, these guys have been getting skewered on social media for years. They will trade. I'll speak for all college football players. They will trade if the home crowd is going to give them a little bit if they're playing bad and poor, the whole team and specifically a player to get booed. It's not fun, but it's part of it, and it's a trade-off that they'll gladly take. So, telling people that you better not be upset if the team doesn't play well, I understand it. The last 100 Michigan games that I've gone to since 1995, I've only sat in the stands 3 times. So I'm up in the press box. There's no cheering in the press box, but there's no booing in the press box either. So I'm out of the loop there. I went to a Nebraska game a couple years ago. The beautiful weather. Dylan McCaffrey came in, threw a touchdown, ran one. It was an awesome experience being down in the crowd. Before that, the second Michigan night game, where it was the Devin Gardner game, perfect weather. I mean, it was the night game. It had to be, 68 degrees at kickoff. No way. I mean, it was just I'm sitting there in shorts and a t-shirt. My mom came with me, my family, my wife. We were all sitting there. We sat in the stands. It was the one of the great experiences that I've ever had. Before that, I don't know, sometimes maybe in 2000, Michigan played a home game against Utah, and I sat in the stands. The other 97 times I was up in the press box. So, me talking about, well, let's, this is how you should act as a fan. I don't know. But I'm going to take some feedback on this, and then we'll get to the collective, and we will get to the hype train. Let's see. LTM did not boo, but he cried at the App State game. I had to be on the radio after the App State game, and I left at halftime. And as I was walking through the golf course, there's still people that are tailgating, and they've got their TVs on, and you can hear, gasps from the stadium. And I was, I could tell it was not going well. LTM was sick. John, the only player I booed was Joe Milton, and that was due to his comments as he left. So you didn't boo him at the stadium, you booed him afterwards. Somebody, App State was hard, but 2015 Michigan loss. I don't know if you're talking about you booed there. Let's see what Antoine, it'd be interesting to see if Antoine's done a little booing here. When it comes to college, I give them a little boo, but it probably wouldn't be a prolonged boo like the professionals. Yeah, I hear you. The professionals, it's like, we have seen, so during the pandemic, you had somebody at a Celtic game, throwing things. I mean, there's a line like, okay, you voice your displeasure, you get that. But then you get personal. You're talking about somebody's mother. You're talking about somebody's race. And then you start throwing things. Come on. Going after a player. We've seen all of that kind of stuff. I don't know if it's a booing is allowed. John was at the Wisconsin game at Ann Arbor. Michigan had 40 yards of offense at the half. 40 to 50% of the fans left. They came back and won, but the boos were loud. Yeah, I think that was Rich Rod's first or second year. I can remember that game myself, being at that. I didn't recall. I thought that there might have been some boos in the Rich Rod era, potentially. So I'll buy that. And I remember that was a great comeback. The thing about losing to App State, it was a clunker, but, and again, I wasn't there for the second half. And true, Michigan was, was in peril. It was a very excruciating game to watch. But you always had the thought that, they're probably going to still win this game. And then you just be really mad and ticked off for the way they played. But I don't know. Like, you could tell me that, people were booing Michigan. I'm sure at the end, as they were just sitting there shocked, potentially that was the case. And, leading up to that was the downfall, temporary downfall. Michigan had really since 1969 up at that point. I mean, it felt like if they weren't an elite football program, and you can argue that they were or weren't, they were knocking on the door if they weren't. But up to that game, they took on a lot of water, and that really knocked them down substantially. And then they followed it up next week against Oregon, and Oregon kicked the crap out of them at Michigan Stadium. And then it was like the car rain was over. All right, still talking about booing. Treppa talking about Rich Rod did not have the full support of the Michigan machine behind him. Correct, Treppa, you are correct. That was one of the issues with Carr not being able to name his successor, and Carr not fully opening up the door and putting out the welcome mat for Rich Rod, and then all of Carr's supporters following in line without rolling out the welcome mat. And then Rodriguez himself not doing himself any favors. I remember that first summer going to something as I was gonna say insignificant. It was a golf outing, a charity golf outing, and Rodriguez was there. Both former Michigan football players, all that kind of stuff. They're a group, little reporters, myself included. You follow the coach around and you ask him, about Ann Arbor, and then I remember asking about, like, what about the Ohio State rivalry? Well, this is a chance, if I'm telling Rich Rodriguez, if I have any friends, if I'm Rich Rodriguez, I should say, hey, somebody's going to ask you about the Ohio State rivalry. Say something like, this is one of the great rivalries in all of sports. You can remember watching it growing up. You can't wait to be a part of it. Maize and blue against Scarlet and gray, anything like that. Did Rich Rodriguez do that? He did something to the effect like, well, you talk about rivalries. I know rivalries. I took place West Virginia and Marshall. That's a pretty big rivalry. And he got all defensive, talking about he knows about rivalries. And he just got off on the wrong foot every time. And then, it was like, I know he was joking. But when his defense was getting, giving up 40, 50, points, you'd say, Coach, during the week in the meeting rooms, I mean, how hands are you when you get into, how hands-on are you when you get into those meeting rooms in the defense? Nah, I just kicked the door open in the defensive room. I let them handle it. Like, I don't know. It was a bad fit. Why did somebody have to bring out? Well, I brought up Rich Rodriguez, but now it's all Rich Rodriguez time. Rich Rod was competent enough to hire, if he was competent enough to hire a good defensive coordinator, Michigan would have been a top 5 team easily. Well, and he did have his coordinator on a plane on the tarmac, and he couldn't deliver them, and that would have been huge if they would have played defense, no doubt. But he also needed a trigger man, and he never did. Whoever those quarterbacks were out of the gate. If he would have got Terrell Pryor, and he would have got his defensive coordinator, and he would have had the support of the former Michigan coaches and players and fans, well, then it could have been a different story. But it didn't have any of that stuff, All right, here's some people that did boo. John booed when they benched Tate Forcier and put in Denard Robinson. Denard should have been a halfback. Well, what was that for the Iowa game? That was the correct decision. Denard was a good quarterback, and he was better than Tate Forcier, John. He was. But could you make the case that he was a better running back than quarterback? Yeah, but he was a better quarterback than Forcier. That was the whole thing. Remember, Hoke screwed that up too. They went to Nebraska. He didn't have a backup. Had Gardner. Why did he have Gardner? They had him as a wide receiver instead of a quarterback, and then Denard. I don't know. That was another thing. Brady Hoke was in. I like Brady Hoke and his family, wife Laura. But he was that was a big trip up by a Hoke. He was in over his head. I think we all know that. Okay. Adrian, the only thing I could ever boo is effort. Well, there you go. So you're saying, like, if you didn't like the effort, let's say somebody just weaved in and out, a running back, you missed a bunch of tackles, and so that looks like effort, and you start booing. Well, you're booing the players, and you say, no, I was booing the effort. I'm booing the coach. You're booing them, and there's a lot of people that are like you. I mean, they'll boo, and LTM being honest, he would boo. Adrian says he would never boo Michigan, and there's a lot of people that are like that. So it's coming down to it, but it is a little bit of a difference now. There is a shift. Because if we were talking about booing college athletes, there was the first thing that everybody would say is, look, they're not professional athletes. What are you doing? I mean, they're college kids. Well, they're college kids, but some of them are getting paid millions of dollars now. So for, I think, some people, that's going to be like, I don't know if it's opening up the floodgates, but there could be a little shift there. The shift has been going on. The older you get, and I like the luxury boxes that Michigan has, and the whole thing with the renovation of the stadium with the bricks and everything. I mean, look, I've sat in a suite for one of the games. I mean, it's as nice as any place in the world. I mean, it's great. The whole thing, it looks great from the outside, all of it. So it was a welcome addition, but that made it that brought him into a different realm. There used to be just this. I remember when I started going to Michigan games. There was just a little scoreboard up on the stadium, just this little thing, and there were no replays. And when Michigan got their first scoreboard, it wasn't all that bigger than the one they had. It was bigger than that, just that little one they had. But then they got a little bit bigger one, and it had a little bit of a replay there. And I can remember being on the radio, and most people were in favor of it. Like, yeah, I can look at a replay instead of waiting till I get home. That's a huge advantage. This was before cell phones. But there were a few people that called and said, this is kind of ruining the game experience. I'd say, well, what are you talking about? And I'd say, when you don't have the scoreboard, everybody just focuses in on the game. And you pretty much have to. If you miss a play, you don't want to miss a play and wait till you have to get home. You don't get a chance, even on the bad calls, to look up there. You don't have that scoreboard. It's going to take away from the experience of being at the game with the crowd being engaged. And I was like, well, it's still worth it. Like, that's what I was thinking. Of course, I was up in the press box and had TVs. And so, like, that, how could I weigh in on that? But there was a point to that. And then when you got your phone and you get the digital screen, I don't know about half the crowd being on their phone, you can't get service in the stadium. So I think most people power off their phone. They know they're not going to go through the hassle of saying they're not going to get service, and they're able to watch but if you really were able to have everybody put their phone away and be engaged, there was a point to that, so that's a lot of talk on booing. I don't know if I got everybody in on it or not, but I was trying to get everybody in on the booing and whatnot. Let's get to what's next. We did talk about the players getting booed. So now that gets us to something new, and it is breaking news. Let me get that sound in. There it is, the Maize and Blue Ann Arbor NIL Club. It is online. This is just happened over the last few hours. Now, I have, they say, a goal of 50,000 per month, and it's at 6.3 thousand. That was from early this morning. And it is a club that supports 110 plus Michigan football players. And you can join in the ultimate fan experience. Well, the first thing when I see that is like, wait a second, there's 85 scholarship players. So they're talking about 25 players in addition to the scholarship players that are going to get money through this name, image, and likeness. I like that. Now, this is not this grand, like gigantic collective that I think is in hope for Michigan football's sake and basketball, that there is this humongous collective that is going to be launched. And they've talked about in fall, and there's a lot of different hoops and there's a lot of work going behind the scenes. This is not that particular gigantic NIL, but this is nice. This one is nice because it's like, hey, you got $5 and you want to donate to Michigan football? Go ahead. And you can get involved just like that. And a little bit more on this collective. Eric All, he put up a player statement about this initiative. Our team-wide name, image, and likeness initiative is live. This was just this afternoon or late morning, and we can't read that even with my glasses, so let's blow that up. Here we go. Here's what it says. Our team has come together to launch the Ann Arbor NIL Club. If you're a fan looking to support our whole team, this is how you can do it. This is a membership-based community that allows fans to financially support and interact with our team. Fans can join right now by making any monthly commitment to the club. Commit what you can. Every fan is welcome and every dollar counts. Proceeds from this club, this NIL, will equally support 110 plus members of the team that are participating. Benefits of becoming a member of this club: financially support the team and ensure we are a leader in NIL. Meet and greets, Q&As with the players. That's fun. Film breakdowns and other player-created content. A community message board and chat to connect with the squad. If you're considering supporting the club, check it out. All right, so a club that you can get in, a Q&A, meet and greets, that kind of stuff. Okay, let's go. You asked for it, and there it is. So anything like that sounds like a good idea to me. Give you 1 second. I've got a cat in the studio that wants to be on the screen, and just that's not going to be able to happen. Sorry, cat, you got to go over here. All right, we're back. We've got some hype editions to get to. Let's first, before we get to the hype train, we had some people commenting in on name, image, and likeness. Adrian saying, Stephen Ross, you should be matching that $50K monthly. Well, here's one thing about collectives. If you're Stephen Ross, you have given, I don't know, millions, hundreds of millions. I don't know how much. He's given millions to Michigan. And so you're going to Stephen Ross again and asking for more money. I know somebody that is an engaged donor for Michigan, and I asked him, like, hey, you're going to be jumping in on these collectives? And he said, I saw Stephen Ross and asked him. These guys are like, I don't know. People just waiting around for the top guys just to come in and throw down the money. I get that. And maybe they will. When you look at the other schools, when you see the big name, image, and likeness, it is one big time money bag dude or, gal. I don't know if there's any women like that are leading the front on any of these universities with name, image, and likeness. But I looked at Michigan State, Matt Ishbia, who every 10 minutes is like recording another $1 million. The guy's just having this incredible financial success. And he's giving it up to the university. Like he's giving $95 million to Tuck. He's any basketball player that, the number one player in the nation. Here's $1 million. He's cutting off, he's given what? I don't know, whatever. Is it $5,000 a week? Whatever it is. Ishbia is just, he's just doling out the cash. There's a guy like that down in Florida. There's some of these Texas A&M guys, they're just throwing that money out. It's boom, 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 boom. Michigan hasn't played that game, there have been a lot of teams, half of the teams in the top 25 and more than that in the top 25 in college basketball, they've had rogue boosters going on for years. And so they're really good at, hey, the team hooks them up, lets them sit up in the press or lets them sit up in the suites and do all these things. And they've been doing this for years. Michigan now, it's a slow process in what's happening here. Antoine's saying, why don't they take some of that ticket money off of these high-priced games and what are you talking about? Giving it to the players? Yeah, see, that's one of these things. Like if you're sitting around in a business, and Michigan's a great business, and the athletic department generates tons of money. They got a lot of donors that are giving them a lot of money. The athletic department, they don't want. Like if Antoine, if you were giving the athletic department $100, and now you say, hey, you know what? Next year, I'm going to give you 50 and I want to give 50 to the collective. They're like, whoa, wait a second. No, they don't want that. The businesses don't want. They always want the percentage of donations to go up. They don't want those percentage of donations to go down to the athletic department. Now, look, I'm just talking it's easy for me to say. There's a lot of people with a lot of money. So, are they going to hook Michigan up? They talked about the richest, smartest, most, biggest, deepest pockets in all the country. So, I hear things like that. So I don't know. Maybe that will happen. It is wild, LTM. You are right. You are right. Talking about parking here. All right, let's get to the hype train. Tell you what, if Michigan beats Iowa, I'm ready to throw 100 down on the collective. I don't know. Well, what do I do? Are you going to put like 100 down on Michigan to beat Iowa? And if they win, send 50 to the collective? I mean, is that how it's going to work? I don't know. For some people. Let's get to those Michigan hype train editions. Now, if you've missed some of the past shows, you can go back. We had, a couple weeks ago, the initial hype train, and I had a top 5. And I think J.J. McCarthy was number 1. Donovan Edwards was 2. Will Johnson was in that hype train. Was he in the initial hype train or was he an add-on? Darius Clemens and Andrell Anthony. Those 5 guys all hyped up. Coaches, people surrounding practice that are talking with folks. They're talking about those players. And McCarthy, like you don't need these guys to be talking about him. McCarthy is going to be hyped. And then Feldman from The Athletic had his freak list, and there were a few players on there. But Mozzie Smith, he joined the hype train, and so did DJ Turner at corner. They were involved in the hype train. Well, I've got 2 additional players to put on the hype train. And let's start with the first one. That is, ladies and gentlemen, A.B. Anoma, who is practicing with Michigan. He's only been there for a week. Word is that AA is, quote, the next Ajabo. Now, look at that. That is hype. Are you here for the hype? A.B. Onama, the next Ajabo. That is hype. Outstanding hype. That I think everybody's here for. All right, and look, he was like all SEC as a freshman. You can say, how in the heck is a guy like this going to be able to get on the field and make his presence felt? He's only been practicing for a week. If you're a Jabo, and what was a Jabo great at? Speed, rush edge, get to the quarterback. That's what he was good at. And Anoma, that's what he's good at. So you get what you think is a passing down. It's not like you've got to know everything that everybody's doing in the scheme if you're Anoma. It's 3rd and 9. Put him in and say, hey, AB, make a beeline for the quarterback. Just burn off the edge and go get the quarterback. That's your scheme. That's your job. That's your assignment. So that is hype. We will see if he is able to live up to that hype of being the next David Ajabo. AB Anoma, the next player. I've got two for the hype train for today. The next is a true freshman. Also from the defensive line rush and spot. One of the pictures that I took at the spring game. I'm very proud of my photo when I got down and took a picture of Derek Moore. There he is, pretty much right down there on the goal line. If there's one thing you can take away from this picture about Moore, is that he doesn't look like a true freshman. He doesn't look like you say, man, he's got a couple years, get him in the weight room with Herbert, and, he'll be good to go. This guy looks like he's ready to play in the NFL right now, physically. Okay. I'm talking about him being the next Aiden Hutchinson. It is the hype train, so you do get a little bit maybe going overboard just a little bit. But you want news out of practice? You want the hype train? There you go. Anoma is the next David Ajabo. And Derek Moore could be out there and could be getting in. And he could be playing. Oh, that's good. All right. Adrian likes that. Is that from actual practice reports? That is from the Maize and Blue Reviews publisher, Josh Henschke, and a source that he spoke with that has watched Michigan practice. I don't know if that fits exactly what you're saying. Is that from actual practice report? They don't come out and say, hey, here's the practice report. They have people that get in touch with, folks like Josh Henschke, the publisher at the Maize and Blue Review, and say, this guy's the real deal. And that's what it sounds like. I don't know if Henschke, he didn't actually, maybe he did make that voice to him when he was on the phone. I just read what Henschke was laying down, one of his 20 practice items. That one caught me. And I thought I would share that little morsel with you. You want the whole meal? Maize and Blue Review. You should be there. I hope you are. It's a fantastic behind the scenes look at everything that's going on with Michigan football, practice, recruiting, all that kind of things. I scratched the surface here, but the Moore thing in Anoma were just too good to pass up to you. And so there it is. Now, the one thing when you come down with the hype train, you then need some perspective. And I'm pretty good at perspective. So we are talking about practice. And what you know is that at the defensive end and outside linebacker position, where you had Ajabo on one side and Aiden Hutchinson on the other, that their two backups last year for the majority of the games, 90% of the time, their backups, Hutchinson and Ajabo, were Taylor Upshaw, Mike Morris, and Jalen Harrell. Those were the guys that were getting all the snaps. McGregor got a few in some mop-up time, Guy with a few snaps. But, for the most part, the three guys that I have bold on the screen, Upshaw, Morris, and Harrell, they were the ones that got the majority of the snaps when it wasn't Ajabo and Hutchinson. So what this tells you is sure, you can have more guys. You can have a rotation of more than four. And in fact, Michigan had pretty much a 5-man rotation last year. But the two top guys, they played, and they should have. They were fabulous players, and they both would have been first-round picks if Ajabo didn't get hurt. So what you're really looking is for two more guys. And speaking of Guy, number 42, TJ Guy, he's been talked about this spring as having, along with spring. We saw him in the spring game. He's been having a good fall. We just talked about the hype train editions of Anoma and Derek Moore. But then you get down to Braden McGregor, Keyshawn Bennett, and George Rooks. All of these guys, maybe they will all play in the first 3 games, but you're going to have a 2 deep, and that's mostly going to be the guys you're rotating. And I think it's going to be those 3 guys that are up top, Upshaw, Morris, and Harrell. And you're really just going to put 1 or 2 more guys in there in a rotational role. Anoma could be that guy. Moore, they both seem like they have a similar skill set. Athletic, coming off the edge, getting to the quarterback. So, how much? Guy, I saw him, I had a great angle in the spring game of him chasing down a ball carrier, engulfing him and slamming him to the ground. He looked great there. I mean, he's better against the run than he is pass. So those kind of situational deals. Can somebody, if you really are an Ajabo type, that means that you can just really get after the pass rusher. Does it mean that maybe you can't play the run? So, because Ajabo, if it was a team that Michigan thought was going to try to play smash mouth, Harrell was in there even over Ajabo last year. I think people are sleeping on Jalen Harrell. This guy's, he looks to be an incredible athlete. He was, playing in some spots, like I just said, over David Ajabo, who would have been a first-round pick. Harrell, as we talk about, well, Michigan really needs to replace guys. Do they have top-end NFL talent? Harrell could be one of those guys that could be a top-end NFL talent. Mike Morris also could be a top-end NFL talent. We don't know about Anoma. Moore's pretty young. These bottom 3, just because we don't have people whispering in Henschke's ear about these guys does not mean that it won't be one of them, but it's just something to think about. Anwar with a question: who is the Antonio Bass type guy in fall practice? Now, Antonio Bass was one of my favorite football players of all time. I think he was out of Belleville. I should know that if I'm claiming that he's one of my favorite football players of all time. From Southeast Michigan, goes to Michigan as a quarterback. It was right around the time Michael Vick was at the height of his NFL powers, and then Michigan's got Antonio Bass. And then Bass got hurt and it never worked out. Now, if you're meaning like who's just like incredible athlete that could play quarterback, I would say the closest thing to Antonio Bass on Michigan's team right now would be Alex Orji. If you're meaning who's the Antonio Bass guy that's getting all of the hype, the most hype, after J.J. McCarthy, Donovan Edwards is getting the most hype. And after Donovan Edwards, Andrell Anthony is getting the most hype. And after Andrell Anthony, McCarthy, and Edwards, you've got Darius Clemens, the true freshman, who is getting tons of hype. We've been through, and then Will Johnson. I mentioned him twice. I don't know. He's worthy of. There's 5 guys. Just mentioned 2, and Anoma and more. A lot of guys with a lot of hype heading into game 1. And hype's fine, and it's fun. And when you hear this, it doesn't mean that Anoma in the first game, hell, he's only been practicing for a week, is going to be out there making an impact. But they look good in practice. They're flashing. And look, it's a lot different. Like if this was a coach, and I don't know exactly who the source is, but if it was a coach who's in all of those film sessions, who's grading these players out, who's deciding who's going out there, and has seen every snap in practice. And, he gets a hold of Josh Henschke and he says, hey, you know what? Moore is flashing. That's hype. That gets you on the hype. That doesn't mean that he's going to game 1 be the starter for Michigan. But when you flash, who was flashing last year in practice? Donovan Edwards in the fall. You talk to people that say, every time big splash plays from the running back, Donovan Edwards. And then you're like, wait a second, Michigan's got Haskins, they've got Corum. I mean, how many, how's Donovan Edwards even going to get the ball? Well, and then he did flash, but it really wasn't until the Maryland game. They kept talking about him, doing things in practice, but it really wasn't until the back half of the season AJ Harrell was good at stopping the run, but he didn't get much pressure rushing the QB. I think he was a little bit light to push through the tackles. Yeah, I don't know, Antoine. That's a good point. That could be, and it's one of those things we'll be dissecting. Going to get a lot of time to see, can he actually get after the quarterback? DJ saying none of us saw Ajabo coming. Harrell's the next man up. Yeah, Harrell is very similar to Ajabo. One thing you can say about the pandemic is that when they did go to the bench during the pandemic, and then there were a couple of different guys that got hurt, you did see 55 coming out there. Not that he was making any plays during the 2020 season, but he played. He was out there. I wasn't sitting around talking about Ajabo. Nobody was sitting around talking about Ajabo. They were just talking about, hey, he's he's getting some playing time. The Otis indicating that Amore is up to 270. Now he's talking about him being 279. Somebody, Ajabo was a Sam Becker last season. Hutch was the edge bro. Yeah, I'm fine with your. If you don't like the analysis here, however it is, these guys were both rush defensive end outside linebackers to me. So that's what I saw, DJ. But hey, okay. However you see it, you're probably right. I mean, if you're really good on the positions on the defensive line and the linebackers and where they're at, I'll take your word for it. All right, so that's the hype train and what it looks like for Michigan, and you just sit around talking about the defensive ends, and you just really don't know. If you have any final thoughts, you want to get them in right now, you can. As we take a look at what I was telling you earlier, you want to know more about practice. You want to know more about what's Michigan's next move on the recruiting front. You can join the Maize and Blue Review today. Go to michigan.rivals.com. One more thing as I go back to the collective and some of the things that I was thinking about. This is good for the team. And this one, when it says 110 plus, I like that idea. It reminded me of this summer when Texas Tech came out with their collective. And whatever it was, I think they said it's something like this. They're giving $25,000, this collective, to every player, scholarship player on the football team, plus the top 10 walk-ons. And that immediately, sent something at least clicking around in my brain. It's like, hey, you're getting, if you're a preferred walk-on now, and you're going to be able to get $25,000 a year, $100,000 is going to go a long way for tuition. And that was Texas Tech. I was thinking, man, if Michigan, if part of it, and this is just me, like I'm not in any of these meetings. These guys think of everything. They're talking about everything, how to go about it and everything else. But if Michigan launched a collective that said, hey, we're giving all the freshmen, in addition to preferred walk-ons, $25,000, then we'll up it to 50 for the sophomore year. Then we'll offer it. Then we'll up it to 75. Then we'll go to 100. You know how many preferred walk-ons or how many walk-ons that would go elsewhere that could go to Michigan if they stayed for 4 years would have their, would pretty much be a scholarship player because of name, image, and likeness. And that's a way around things. Back in the day, one of the big reasons that Nebraska turned into the powerhouse that they were, they had 105 players on scholarship, 90 players on scholarship. 105. That wasn't that because it's 85 now. And this is a way to really strengthen your team. Now, the one thing, now I don't know if Michigan's going to do that, but with this here, you can see that money is going to, as well as it going to the quarterback, it's going to walk-ons. So, being able to get a little change that way, that's going to help the football program. That's a boost. That's a positive to me. The one part that Michigan, and this should maybe have gone back to the preview, because you say, hey, preview Michigan football, and there has been, like we say, well, what about Harbaugh, leaving to the NFL? Is that hurting recruiting? Is that going to hurt Michigan this year? Well, it's not going to hurt Michigan during the season this year. true enough, he went after that Vikings job, and whatever happened there, that could affect recruiting, but it's not affecting. It was good that for Michigan football that Harbaugh came back. Now, true enough, he lost his offensive coordinator because of his fling with the pros. And true enough, it is used as negative recruiting across the country. And it could be true because Michigan, you could say, is not hitting home runs in recruiting. I think that has more to do with name, image, and likeness than it does with Harbaugh going after the Vikings job. But it doesn't matter what really I think or you think. Is there a perception, that Harbaugh would jump after this year? It is being said a lot. Why is that? Well, the last 2 years, not just this last year, but the year before, you could make a case that Harbaugh was looking for an NFL job. Now, he didn't come out and say that, but it sure looked like that's what he was doing, even though he told everybody that was not what he was doing. And Michigan fans were like, oh, well, he said he wasn't doing that. And then this year, after it was all done, whether you believe that it was him or whether it was the Vikings, that part doesn't matter to me. But Harbaugh afterwards said publicly, he said that he wasn't doing it anymore, that he was not, this was it. This was his one-time deal. Now you say, oh, it's Michigan fan. Like, okay, hey, he had an itch, he scratched it. It was a one-time deal. He's back. Great. That's not the way people look at it nationally. More coaches than not lie their asses off when it comes down to any kind of jobs. And so do you think people nationally really think Jim Harbaugh is telling the truth when it comes down to an NFL job? Like if Michigan had success, it is because more than half of the coaches, they do lie all the time. They lie constantly. But if you're a Michigan fan, you're like, well, Jim Harbaugh said it. And then the year before he said he wasn't doing anything. And do I believe that he has done? I'm halfway on all of that. I believe that after the pandemic, that Harbaugh was hoping that an NFL team was going to call him, and none of them did. I believe that if the Chicago Bears didn't make the playoffs, that they would have fired Matt Nagy. They did make the playoffs. They lost to the Saints. I believe the Bears would have gone after Jim Harbaugh. I don't know if he would have taken the job. They would have gone after him. Now, considering that he certainly would have had a lot more leverage than he did when they slashed his contract in half and he had to come back. Some people say, on his hands and knees, however you want to look at that. So I believe that he was out there interested in an NFL job. Michigan people on the inside, and a lot of those inside people have gone to the media and have told them as insiders, like, that is not how it went down. I just choose not to believe that. I choose to believe how it looked and how it played out. And that's going to be my belief on it. Now, who cares? I'm just giving you my opinion on it. This past year, with Harbaugh not going to the pros, however that ended up working out with the Vikings, I do believe that Harbaugh is done. And if you really think about it, the next 3 years, when you look at the buyout of like $20 million and it's going, it would have to be at least 3 more years. I don't think anybody's going to come to the table and say, yeah, here's $20 million and going to buy him out. So, but people don't talk about that like nationally. It's like, Harbaugh, if they have a good year, he's gone. First chance you get. And you can understand Rivals doing that because that's what, not Rivals.com, Rivals of Michigan, because they're always looking, to say something to cut down the maize and blue. That's what you do with your opponents. You can take a shot at Michigan State. You're a Michigan fan, you do it. If somehow things don't look right with Ohio State, you pounce. That's what other teams are doing with Harbaugh. So that was a long way of getting around and talking about the preview. When the question is, what about Harbaugh? But that's where I'm at when it comes down to Harbaugh. KC says Harbaugh isn't going to the NFL because no one wanted him. The Vikings turned him down. Yeah, maybe they did, KC. Certainly the GM wanted him. And I do believe that the GM thought, maybe wrongly, that he had the power to go ahead and say, hey, we're bringing you in. You got this. We have to just go through this meeting. And usually when that's the case, that, I think Harbaugh had a pretty good idea that he was going to get that job, but it very well could have been. I mean, if you believe it, questions asked, 100% this is how it went down. Okay, I'm not 100% sure how that went down. If that was, I think that Harbaugh felt like he was going to be able to get that job, and maybe the owners, even though he had his new GM, and the GM thought that when the owner got in there and started talking, and sometimes there's just not that chemistry. It could have been a little bit of Harbaugh, and it could have been a little bit of the coach saying, "Oh, well, get out of this. We're not dancing. We've got no chemistry." I think that's what happened. No, it doesn't matter. Like these are the things that it doesn't matter, because you can believe whatever you want. You can believe what your favorite Michigan insider has to say, and you can believe me. And maybe I should be your favorite Michigan insider. All right. KC says, from what he heard, the interview went terrible. I believe that. I believe the interview went terrible. I'll buy that. Otis says, many perceive that Harbaugh would immediately start competing against Saban, and ESPN was afraid of that. I don't think ESPN was afraid of that. I do think that Paul Feinbaum is, he is, came out of the SEC, loves the SEC, and everything revolves around the SEC. And he was working with ESPN, and pretty quickly ESPN's focus was the SEC and the SEC network. So they are going to be skewed, towards the SEC. And then, so does that mean they're going to be anti-Harbaugh? Like, Harbaugh was good for business for Paul Feinbaum and ESPN and anybody that talks about college football. People like quirkiness when it comes down to coaches. They like somebody that came in and it was firing off a tweet at Nick Saban. They like somebody that was driving around in the car, claiming that nobody had it better than them. They liked all of that. They liked that he ripped off his shirt and was climbing up trees and was milking cows and driving around cars and sleeping over recruits. They loved all of that. Are you kidding me? People are always like, I don't know why everybody's so infatuated with Harbaugh. What are you talking about? Paul Chryst isn't having satellite camps down in Alabama and going into all-you-can-eat contests at, the barbecue. Just Jim Harbaugh's doing that. Jim Harbaugh likes Judge Judy in big-time wrestling and MMA and God knows what else. Harbaugh's a hit machine when it comes down to the media. What's this guy going to do next? I mean, if a coach from across the country, you could spread out like 20 things that Harbaugh did, and you could say, wow, now this guy's kind of exciting. He's doing something. Harbaugh did 20 of those things. Come on. Let's see. Well, thanks, Logan. Let's see what Bryant has to say. Jim has no respect for non-football people. I don't know about that, Bryant. Does any, like a football coach, they've got a lot of things that they have to do. Recruit, coach the team, be able to have all their, position coaches, run practices, get the team situated, all those things, and I mentioned recruiting and all that. And then you have to speak every week you're obligated, to speak to the media. You've got all your other reporters and, Michigan handpicks, like a lot of teams do. And, they do as much job to the best job they can to filter out the message, all that kind of stuff. But I think a lot of coaches, it's like, I don't know. I don't think about a lack of respect. Like, that's all he does is eat, sleep, and it's all he is football. That's all he's ever been is football. So, you're talking about, well, what's he think about non-football people? I don't know. I think that that he has certain respect for people in the jobs that they do. I've known some people that have worked for him. You know what they say to me? That's all Jim Harbaugh thinks about is football. That's all he thinks about is Michigan. I remember the guy telling me, he's not with the staff anymore, but I was out with him in Ann Arbor, and he was like, I can remember all of this work that I did, and they were going into the holiday week, and it was it was a 3-day weekend, and it was like the first morning of the 3-day weekend that they were getting, and they don't get any of that. And the guy said, the phone rang, and he saw that it was Harbaugh, and he thought, maybe Harbaugh's telling me to have a great weekend or something. And he got up and said, "Hey, can you get this going for Monday?" And it was like, and the guy was like, "This is the first hour of like the first time I was going to have 3 days, free to myself." And Harbaugh was, thinking about what they could get going, on Monday when they got back. He said, like, that's all he cares about is winning for Michigan and getting that job done. This was, in his early, time for the Wolverines. I think he's obsessed with trying to win for Michigan. And so it could have come off cold, like to, report it. Sure. A lot of coaches that, are going to be that way. I don't know. Sometimes the quirkiness plays for people that are not football, people. He gets in there, talks about reading a book or whatever he does. But it's included when you're doing a Michigan football preview, and I buried it here to the end. What do you think about Jim Harbaugh? And that's what I think. I think that it's a good news that he came back to Michigan, and I was not singing that tune last year at this time. And when I looked at Jim Harbaugh last year at this time, he didn't have the look that he has now. He looked downtrodden. He looked like, he had aged 20 years and 5, like the old George Jones song. But he looks refreshed now. And I would be as excited about Michigan football as I have been in the Jim Harbaugh era right now. This is the most exciting. Sure, you were really exciting the first year and second year, but this team has more talent than either of those years. And he is coming off of actually doing it against Ohio State and winning the Big Ten. And this team is loaded that he has. However you look at graphs and all this kind of stuff for Michigan football, wherever you thought it was when Jim Harbaugh came in, and then, he took it here, and then certainly, with losing to Ohio State, but, if he would have beat Ohio State, it would have been a lot different, and there would have been some ups and downs. And then the pandemic was way down here. It's as high as it's ever been. Michigan has its best team in the Jim Harbaugh era. And, they've got their best chance to win a national championship this year in the Jim Harbaugh era. More than last year. And you say, how can you say that? Well, they had a Jabo and they had Hutchinson. I think that overall, the talent that they have on defense, they need some guys to emerge. But I think because of the schedule, the talent, and the belief now that they can go out there and beat Ohio State, then I think that they have a better chance at winning it all this year. Now, hell, if they would have been able to match up against Cincinnati like they should have been, you never know what's going to happen in a championship game. You could argue it. You could argue that point. You could come after it. Come after me. And you can do that again tomorrow. We'll be here tomorrow at 1 o'clock. We are live weekdays at 1 o'clock talking about the latest in Michigan sports. I want to thank everybody for getting in and leaving their thoughts, watching on, I don't know if you're watching on Twitter or just listening on Twitter. You have the availability. I should tell you, if you're somebody that's listening on Twitter Spaces right now, you can go to the Maize and Blue review and you can watch and listen at the same time. You can say, why would anybody want to watch? Well, you can see the outstanding studio for one. The other thing is that, sure enough, I'm reading the feedback, but you can actually see it on the screen. Plus, I, do have some other visual aids. You can hear my favorite sound effect, the hype train. We'll hype it up tomorrow. We'll be here 1 o'clock. Everybody have a great day. Bye.